Welcome to a Legendarium special about the Khodynka tragedy, when a coronation turned into a stampede. Upon the death of his father Alexander III, Nicholas II became Emperor of Russia in spring 1896. His reign would be marred by tragedy, and his coronation served as an evil omen. It took place near the Khodynskoye field, then a training ground for the Moscow garrison, and a traditional place for mass events. During the last two generations, it became a gathering place to celebrate the coronations of new Russian emperors. So it surprised no one when the planners chose to use Khodynskoye Field for the same purpose. Nicholas's uncle, Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich, Governor-General of Moscow, bought 10,000 buckets of mead, 30,000 buckets of beer, and many theaters and show booths for use. Grand Duke Sergei also prepared a special present. It contained a spice bread with Nicholas's monogram upon it, a piece of sausage, some sweets and walnuts, a bread roll, and a commemorative painted enamel mug. All these goods would be wrapped into a headscarf. Much to the Grand Duke's surprise, people came not only from Moscow but from the surrounding villages. About 400,000 guests, very nearly 1 in 2 residents of that day's Moscow, visited this immense party on May 18th, 1896. Vladimir Zhuvinsky, an aide-de-camp of Sergei Alexandrovich, later said, "The whole field was thickly covered with people. The builders set up buffets for handing out presents in a line from the edge of Moscow to a cemetery outside the city, which would prove fitting. Unfortunately, ditches for digging clay and sand lay only 20 to 30 paces from the buffets. Even worse, the field had many holes that the crowd could stumble into. Guests started packing into the field at noon. Rumors spread that some of the presents would include monograms of a house, cow, or horse on the headscarves. That would mean the lucky winner got the deed to a house, a cow, or a prize horse. This made people all the more determined to get their swag. The crowd in the field became so tightly packed that a reporter recalled that he could not move his arms. A stampede started, pushing small children out of the crowd and up to the top. Some had a chance to crawl to safety by stepping on the heads of people. Below them, the pressed people started to faint but continued standing as they had nowhere to fall. Foul-smelling mist formed a cloud over the field. New rumors spread that there would not be enough presents to give to everyone, so the pressing strengthened. Some began to fall over, and the crowd stomped on them. The workers at the buffets threw the gifts to the crowd and worsened the situation even more. A reporter named Gilarovsky wrote, "I was absolutely losing consciousness and getting exhausted of thirst." Eventually, a group of Cossack horsemen tried to break up the crowd, and Gilarovsky tumbled down near the fence of a running route. He proved one of the lucky ones, for he escaped with his life. Within 10 terrifying minutes, 1,389 lives ended, and another 900 people suffered terrible injuries. By the time the stampede ended, broken and battered corpses littered the field. When Grand Duke Sergei learned of the tragedy, he gave an immediate order to remove the dead before Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra arrived. The authorities found dead people on the field, crammed into the ditches, and another 27 dead crammed into a well. Many others failed to realize their injuries and escaped the field until they collapsed from sudden pain and died. To Khodynka, they saw carts loaded with hurt or dead people. Nicholas II learned of the stampede already, and the tragedy made him terribly upset. Later he wrote in his diary, "This news left me with a disgustful impression," and he called the stampede a great sin. Despite the tragedy, the program of festivities continued as planned, with many unaware of the tragedy that had taken place. At Khodynka, the people bade welcome to the emperor and the empress. In the evening, Nicholas went to a ball held by the French ambassador Montebello, where Russia's ally threw a grand celebration. The French government brought in tapestries and plate from Versailles and Fontainebleau, along with 100,000 roses from the south of France. It is important to note that France ranked as Russia's most important ally, and not going to the festivities after the ambassador's hard work would have been a terrible snub. Despite the revelry, the new emperor did not dance and drank no champagne. In one room, electric lights lit up a fountain, and in another, workers converted rooms into winter gardens. Mountains of fragrant flowers greeted the guests. Indeed, Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra stayed only a brief time before leaving, since the tragedy genuinely upset them. The imperial family gave the victims' families 90,000 rubles from the family allowance as compensation. The emperor and empress then visited the injured in the hospitals the next day. Nevertheless, Moscow society did not remember these kind gestures, but regarded Nicholas's refusal to stop the parties as disrespect for the victims. The Khodynka tragedy also ruined the reputation of Sergei Alexandrovich, who received the nickname Duke of Khodynka. Both he and the Moscow chief of police would be dismissed from public life. Later investigations found that sloppy planning and bad luck caused the horrific tragedy. Revolutionaries later used Nicholas's attending a French ball after the tragedy to prove his indifference to the suffering of his subjects, ignoring his own anguish and attempts at charity. In the minds of the superstitious, this served as an evil omen for what Nicholas's reign would bring to the Russian Empire, and given how events unfolded, one cannot say they were wrong. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.